Hi, this is David Gass at Anderson Business Advisors, and today we have with us a special guest from our wealth management department in Anderson Financial Services and Anderson Wealth. And I'm going to go in and explain a little bit about David's background here in just a second. But I want to first off just talk to everybody about the webpage that you're on, making sure everybody understands where you ask questions and all of that. When you're on the webpage directly, you want to make sure that you're going to find on it. And I'm listening to myself, so hold on one second. There we go. So on the web page itself, you're going to find a little pop-up that happens in the lower right-hand corner. That's with our greeters that are not in this room, so don't ask questions inside of that little box. You're going to find right below our video there, it says leave a comment, and you'll put in your name and email and comments in there. And throughout the webinar today, we'll take those questions, and at the end of the webinar, we'll go into the questions. But if you want to ask questions there, that's where you do it. And when you ask question there, you can type in your information, hit submit. It will refresh the page when you do that, and you can just hit play again on the video, and it'll pick right up where you left off. At any time, if you have to break or go away, you can always hit pause on the video and come right back and be able to watch exactly where you left off as well. So again, today our guest speaker is David McShane. He's a certified financial planner, accredited asset management specialist. He's been in the financial services industry for about 40 years here. And you're not from where we are right now, sitting here in Vegas. So give us a little bit of background on where you're from.
Sure. Thanks, David. Yeah. Hi, folks. I've been doing this for 40 years, but I started up in Montreal, Canada. I'm a member of a banking family. Dad was in the banking business his whole career. My mom was in the business, my brother, sister-in-law, my ex-wife, etc. So this has been what I've done for a long, long time, but I moved down to this side of the border to once upon a time play a little bit of ice hockey, which we do back home in Canada, and decided to stay down here and continue to take care of my trade in the financial services business.
Yeah, we can see in the picture on the website you did play a little hockey.
Yeah, you can see there's no teeth in it. Yeah, that picture's missing some
Perfect.
teeth.
Yeah. No, so as we go along here, we're going to start diving into the Private Vault. The book you see here is by one of our partners in the organization within Anderson Financial Services, Gregory Boots, one of the attorneys here. And we're going to really dive into a little bit of the pieces that he talks about in this book as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. So the first thing that we'll do is dive right in, and I'm going to make sure that we have these things set up right. So one of the things you talk about, David, is mentioning quite often about being a fiduciary. So would you maybe give us just an explanation of what that means in the context of today's webinar specifically?
Sure, David. Yeah, thank you. When I represent what I do as a certified financial planner and also as an investment advisor representative, I am bound by both regulation and oath and standards under the designation side to be a fiduciary. And that's a word that you're hearing a lot more about. In fact, as you see on your screen, this is pretty fresh. This is March 17th. This is the head of the SEC, Mary Jo White. There's been a lot of battle between Wall Street and the folks that would work there and the SEC itself, saying they no longer, or they do not wish to be overregulated, overmonitored, etc. And the challenge that the folks on the SEC side have had is that anybody can be a broker, anybody can be a financial advisor, anybody can say they're a financial planner. But unless they've had the proper training, they've got the proper designations, they've been examined, et cetera, that doesn't mean that they are a fiduciary. A fiduciary has a sole responsibility to make sure that he or she does the absolute right thing by the client. In other words, having been a broker in my past and having been an insurance guy for one of the large insurance companies, et cetera, when you work for those organizations, with all due respect to whichever company it may be, they pay you to sell a product. At the end of the day, if you don't sell that product, you don't feed your family. Therefore, if you're in those roles at those organizations, it's very, very difficult to have an unbiased view of what your client needs when your own need is, I got to sell a product today, which may or may not be a good fit for our clients. As a certified financial planner and as an investment advisor representative, I have to ensure that everything I do when I'm working with clients is always in their best interest. If it's not, it doesn't matter whether I get paid or don't get paid, it can't be done and it shouldn't be done.
Yeah, that's good. So really what it comes down to is when I'm out there talking to some of these financial people I've talked to in the past, I won't name specific banks or anybody else because we've talked about it a little bit, is I always seem to get the same kind of routine based on whatever the push was by their supervisors, it seemed like.
Yeah, absolutely. In banking business, having been a former bank executive, one of the challenges bankers have is when you have somebody who's being paid by a product, yet you tell the public that you're trying to do the best thing for the client, how do you accomplish that and do it properly?
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions out there regarding income tax rates and where they're going right now. So give us your thoughts on it based on your experience over the last 40 years of this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Having done this a long time, I've seen, as we all have, those of us that are a little more seasoned, like myself, we've seen rates go up and down and sideways. We've seen incentives, the Reagan years and so on and so forth. But here's our reality today. And I've asked many clients, I get the same answer every time, but I say, if you had to answer a poll today that said, are taxes going to be higher, lower, or the same? If we look at 10, 15, 20 years, almost consistently people say higher. When you ask them why, they have their reasons, but let's talk a little bit about those reasons. This information is as of a few hours ago, and it comes off a website called usdebtclock.org. And I encourage you to go there sometime if you want to see the ticker going. It's actually scary. There's a lot of numbers there, but the ones that are pertinent to today's discussion, as of a few hours ago, each taxpayer in this country currently has a bill outstanding of $154,000. Beyond that, each man, woman, and child has a personal bill for personal debt of $52,000. Now, the second is your own responsibility, as it always is. However, the first one, there's a lot of programs we all didn't sign up for, but we all have a piece of the invoice, if you will, at this stage. Having said that, how do you pay off $18 trillion if you don't do something on the tax side? It's virtually impossible. In fact, there's been some studies done recently, and people will say, well, rates can't go up to the numbers that we're hearing. For instance, beyond the deficit, Social Security and Medicare alone, just to continue to meet the obligations as they stand today, would suggest that we're going to need a tax rate of 70% in 2035 and 80% in 2050, which for the children of today, that is really something that's not very interesting to be looking forward to. Well, folks will say, well, Dave, that sounds that's scary, and fear is what it is. But that doesn't make any sense. Well, the reality, if we look back in time in history, and this one just precedes me a little bit, not by much, but back in the 30s and the 50s, through the 50s, tax rates the top marginal rates were anywhere from 79 to 94%. Now in the 70s, the Carter era, they ran about 70%. Now that was for a very specific group of people. The challenge we've got today is it's going to be for everybody. And so when you're thinking of that, and you're talking to your provider about 401ks and traditional IRAs and socking away tax deferred money that you're going to pay taxes on someday down the road, keep in mind that today's tax rate may be much less than your future tax rate. So each individual situation bears its own discussion, and as a CFP, we always do that one-on-one. So I'm making a general statement, and it doesn't have pertinence until we sit down and get to know each other. But generally speaking, it looks like tax rates are heading north as we go forward in the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I'd say there's very few people that wouldn't agree with you based on that comment. Yeah.
So here's the reality that we all face. I face it just like the rest of you. My dad, God bless him, he just passed last year. He had a full pension till the day he was gone. Worked 50 years for the same company, and which some of our parents, maybe some of you on the call, had the same situation. So he was taken care of until the day he left us. His long-term care was taken care of, as was my mother's. And so I didn't have to share that burden with my brother as far as taking care of mom and dad. Well, I don't have the same deal, and I don't know about a lot of you out there, but a lot of you probably don't have that same deal. So we're having to put our own pension plans together, our own retirement plans together, et cetera. And we're having to do that in light of the things that are going on. Janet Yellen came out a couple of days ago, and she's saying out of one side of her mouth, we're going to raise rates, but on the other side, but we're going to do it slower than we originally thought we would. And we've seen what's happened to the market in the last several days. So the challenges we have, which are obvious, but I just thought we'd listen so we could remember as we get into a little bit of the dialogue here: equity market volatility, bond markets. If the interest rates go up and you're sitting on a bunch of bonds right now, quite frankly, it's just math. Your portfolio is going to go down. Taxes, just based on the discussion we had. Reinvestment risk. Those of you that bought bonds in the 80s know what I'm talking about. When you got those bonds from really, really good companies at 10, 11, 12, 13%, how did that feel when they matured in 30 years? You were reinvesting it at 1 and 2 and 3%. Reinvestment risk is real. The timing of returns. If you put your money into the market at the beginning of 2009, you've probably done reasonably okay. I'm talking the equity markets. If you put it in on January 1st of 2008, that was a pretty tough year when you were down 37% based on the S&P 500. Longevity. A lot of us, God bless us, we got all kinds of medicine out there. It's keeping us alive forever. My mom was 89, dad was 92. Again, they had pension plans in their case. However, if you don't, the challenge today is how do you invest your money to make sure you still have some when you're still here? So that's something that has to be considered. Healthcare risk. Medicare sounds great, but they're also talking about reducing Medicare, one, so the tax bill doesn't have to be as much, and two, so they don't have to pay the benefits. Also, as you think about Social Security, which isn't listed here, but the cost of living increase in Social Security never looks like the number that they publish in the newspaper, and that's because they exclude certain things, being energy and food. Well, I don't know about yourselves, but in my house, it seems like those are the two things that seem to go up typically every month, but they don't include them. Why? Because obviously they don't want to have a cost of living increase that's 4 when they can make it 2. And then inflation is a concern that we are all living with, and of course that's something that they're concerned about at the Fed right now. So here's something I like to call it the pillow money. Your life from a financial perspective is really buckets of money. A lot of people will say, I have a portfolio. I usually sit down with them and say, okay, let's look at your timeline. Let's look at the things you want to do. Let's take a look at all the different buckets of money, and are they serving the purpose that they're supposed to? In other words, you have bills to pay next week. You probably need some money in your checking account. You got some things you want to do in 3 to 5 years. You probably don't want to lock that away in investments that are not very liquid, because you're going to need to get access to that money fairly quickly, or that money is going to have to turn into cash to pay those bills in 3 to 5 years. But then as you look out into 10 and 15 and 20 years, your retirement years for a lot of us that you either will be in or close to, etc., that's a whole different bucket of money. So what I'm going to be talking about briefly today is pillow money, the money that you feel like when you get to that stage of your life, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fed. You're going to have a roof over your head. You're going to have clothing on your back. You're going to be fine. And I think when you know that you've got that socked away and everything's locked up the way it should be, it just helps you sleep at night.
I would say most people that are in that position, and I know my mother-in-law which is in a spot where there's money sitting there, but she worries. She worries about the fluctuation in the market because the majority of that money is sitting in the market, and she doesn't have that fixed income. So one month it might be, hey, can I come over for dinner a couple nights? Versus
right.
The next week, hey, let me take you out to dinner, right? So because it's that fluctuation. I see what you're saying when it comes to the pillow money.
Well, I think we're seeing a phenomena that we saw the opposite way years ago, where mom and dad are starting to move back in with the kids, whereas it used to be the kids, if they didn't make it out in the cruel world, would move back in with mom and dad. So times have changed, certainly.
So let me just ask on the private vault for all those needs and the concept, is it based on what's here? I mean, and what we're seeing, we'll start diving into this. Maybe give us a little bit of an explanation of what Greg's book, when he says the private vault, that's what he wrote as the title, right? So give us an explanation of all of this here.
Well, I think where Greg is coming from, and it's not a brand new concept. I mean, Greg's book's been out a couple of years. There's some other folks that have written on a similar topic. But the reality of it is, if you don't take care of yourself, given the way the world is today, nobody else is going to take care of us. Now, when I say by yourself, that doesn't mean you shouldn't partner with people that can help you accomplish that. And certainly you should, partner with people that can help you get there. But it's basically, if you're sitting waiting for something from the government at this stage, you're probably going to get it, but it's going to be in the form of a tax bill. So Greg's concept is that you put a program in place that needs time, and we'll go into that here in a few slides, to grow and do the things it needs to do. It's not an overnight get-rich scheme. In fact, it's not a get-rich scheme whatsoever. But it's something where you basically look at it and say, let's get yourself situated where you can take care of yourself going forward. Thus, he calls it the private vault, which I think is a very, very good way of talking about it. And
based on what he's saying, we're okay with the IRS in terms of this, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I'll talk about that in a minute. That's a great question, David. Well, here's my little guy. You might be wondering, because there's not a lot of words there. There's a little bank robber, I guess. He's got the vault on his back, and he's scurrying away to somewhere. And folks have said to me when they see that slide, they said, okay, Dave, I'm missing something here. Well, here's the thing. As I said earlier, I grew up in a banking family. Everybody worked for the bank. So I have a pretty good knowledge of how banks work. And I think you all probably do that are on this call. They give you 0% interest on your money, or 1% perhaps on the high side. And then you go next week and say, I need to buy an automobile, I need to buy a home, I need to buy some furniture, whatever it may be. And they're going to charge you a rate which is much higher. And that's the fundamental basics of how a bank makes money. Now, they as you know, unfortunately for some of them, have gotten into some other things over the years, some of which have harmed them in many cases. But fundamentally, that's what banking's all about. Borrow at 0% and lend it back out at 5%. Now, I just recently moved to Vegas to join Anderson. I went through what a lot of you have gone through probably several times in your lives. I had to go get a mortgage. And I'm not going to brag too much on myself here, but I've never not paid a bill. My FICO score, as they call it, is really, really high. I make a nice living here working at Anderson, so on and so forth. So I assumed this would be a pretty easy process. But I'll tell you, by the time I was done, I felt like that little guy with the vault on his back. I felt like I'd gone in to rob the bank, to actually take their money that I didn't deserve, even though I thought it was a pretty good credit risk, versus a valued customer. So that's really the purpose of this slide. And I don't know if any of you out there feel that way when you go to your bank sometimes. And there's some awesome bankers, so I'm not trying to pick on bankers in general, because I'd be picking on myself as far as my past. But that's kind of the way it feels these days. So that's what that slide's all about. Now we're starting to get in a little bit into the meat of it. We're not going to get into the real deep details of the concept, quite honestly, because we need several hours to do that. And I'll give you some contact info at the end as to how we can talk one-on-one about this if you have an interest. But if we set up this private vault properly, here's some of the things that you can do with it. Consumer purchases, automobiles, large appliances, etc. College education for yourself or your children, your primary residence for that matter. Other investment purchases, perhaps rental properties, etc. Loans to your business, where your business can take a tax deduction when it pays you back. Funding your retirement needs in your later years, actually taking money out of this program tax-free and if it's done properly, and using it for your retirement needs in later years. Now, here's the thing. Back in the 70s, the insurance companies latched on to this program, and they said, this is awesome. Let's get everybody to put as much cash as they possibly can into it. And at the time, quite frankly, there weren't many restrictions in place. Well, Congress and the IRS and everybody else said, whoa. This doesn't feel very good. Where's all our money going? So in 1988, they passed an act. It's called the Technical and Miscellaneous Revenue Act. It probably had 8,000 other things in it, but that's what they call it. And for short, it's called TAMRA. And basically what it did was it reined this program back in. And they said, you can still do this, but with some very strict parameters. So point being, to use this program, it's got to be done by people that know what they're doing, that do it properly, because if it's not done properly, this program turns into a taxable situation, and that's not good for anybody. But if done properly, I would suggest, and I'm saying this now, and this is why we talked about fiduciary at the beginning, I've done my due diligence on this upside down and backwards. I'm not saying this is for everybody on this call. Until I get to know you, I can't even begin to say if it's for whoever you are out there. But I will say for those that it is appropriate for, it's a good concept. It's not going to solve all your problems by any means, but it's a good portion of your financial picture as you go forward, especially for the later years.
So as we're describing this, just to kind of bring it back into context, especially for those that maybe jumped in a little later after we started, we're talking about taking money of your own money, putting it into private vault, if you will, right? And you're talking about having that for yourself at retirement. And you're mentioning here something regarding, loans, being able to loan that money out. give us a little bit of explanation of what you mean by that and how that would work.
Right. Well, we're not trying to hide anything here. The financial tool that we use, and that's used by the professionals that use this appropriately and well, it's insurance. It's cash value insurance. Now, here's the thing. And I travel in the circles of financial advisors and brokers, and I've been them. I've done them. I've sold products to them as a wholesaler in the past. And you're going to get different views. And right away they go, it's insurance. It doesn't make any sense. If it's done properly, quite frankly, it does make sense. But if I'm a broker and I make my money by selling you a mutual fund or a bunch of stocks today or whatever, the last thing in the world I want to do is have you go and take any of your money and put it into another product that I cannot make money off of. So always keep that in mind when somebody right away goes, oh, poo-poo, that's not going to work. It does work. It's got to be structured properly. And if it's structured properly and the person that's involved with this program has the patience and understands this is a long-term process, it works very, very well. So here's some of the other advantages you get, which again, you don't get with a CD, you don't get with an IRA, you don't get with a Roth IRA or 401k, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be using some of those strategies at all. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But the funds inside this program in most states are protected from creditors. Now, it depends on the state, and we have some information that we can pass on as that goes, or you can consult your legal counsel in the state in which you live. But in many cases, the funds are protected from creditors, which is pretty nice, from that pillow money comfort perspective. You can participate in the market gains, but not the losses. And past gains are locked in. So in other words, if you had put this into this program back in January 1st of 2008, quite frankly, depending on how it was structured, you would have made zero in 2008. But I can tell you, looking back, as we all can look back now and say, gosh, I wish I'd known, if I had had a discussion with my clients as their certified financial planner on January 1st of 2008 and said, I need you to trust me. I can't tell you why. I just feel something, whatever it is. We're going to take all of your assets and put them in the safe deposit box or a checking account in cash. If you didn't fire me and you said, I'm going to trust you because you've always done a good job for me, at the end of December of 2008, if you had made zero versus negative 37, you'd have been pretty happy. Not thrilled, because we all like to make money, but zero looked awfully good versus negative 37. This strategy, if done properly, that's what would have happened in that year. You would have made zero. You wouldn't have made the negative 37. Point being that when you start 2009, which was an up year in the market, you start at ground zero. You're not starting at negative 37% down. That's a great starting spot to get yourself back in the game. So you participate in the market gains, not the losses. Your past gains are locked in. So once you hit certain gains, you can lock those in and they're yours forever. Funds are exempt from disclosure when applying for college financial aid. A lot of other strategies that you put your money into, if you have kids that are of college age or will have kids of college age, if you're going for some financial aid, they want to know everything you have before they give those loans or grants in some cases. Tax-free income does not increase income tax liability on your Social Security. If you've got income beyond your Social Security in those years when you start taking it, it starts to work against your Social Security. It basically becomes kind of a zero-sum game. You make $1 here, but you lose $1 there type of thing. So this does not affect that way. The cash value itself grows tax-deferred. That's pretty attractive. Now, people will say, well, a Roth IRA grows tax-deferred, the earnings on it. That's true. And a Roth IRA perhaps should be part of somebody's portfolio, but think about it. A Roth IRA allows you to put $5,500 or $6,500, depending on your age, into it each year. A lot of folks are saying, well, but I have $30,000 I want to put into something. So even though a Roth IRA may be a good solution, perhaps not. And again, don't forget with the Roth IRA, those earnings that you're not paying the taxes on, you're not going to take out for some time. And actually, there may come to a point when you have to start taking things out when you don't really want to.
Aren't you limited if you make a certain amount of money to be able to put money in?
Plus,
anyway, because most people that have that kind of money to throw in,
depending on your income, you're caught in the other side
Yeah.
of the coin is that you start cutting back on even that $5,500 because you're outside of the limits. Exactly, David. Thank you. So here's our little guy. He's planting trees. So this would be year one. It typically takes about 5 years to fund a program like this. Again, this is not an overnight thing. It's done properly. It's grown properly. You plant, you fertilize, you water, and it typically takes about 5 years, depending on the circumstances of the particular case, the individuals involved, to fund a program like this. Again, that is to make sure you stay on the right side of the IRS. You want to make sure you're following the rules, don't want to get in trouble with anybody, so that you can maximize the opportunity of using this program and to your advantage as years go on.
Now, and one of the things I think is important that I've heard you say before is that this is not about throwing 100% of your retirement money into one thing. It's about diversification as well. And we hear a lot about that, but I mean, that's truly what we're saying, right?
Yeah, and you're so right, David. The thing, when I sit down and talk to clients, I'll get people go, wow, this is a great concept. Let's throw all of my money in here. You should not throw all of your money into anything. I mean, there's other things you need to be considering as far as a diversification, but for long-term money, and even not necessarily all of your long-term money, it's not a bad place to start having a discussion about. But yeah, anybody that tells you should throw a whole ton of money into this or any other concept, I guarantee you probably is only compensated by selling that product. And that's not the right answer for anybody. Again, coming back from my certified financial planner roots, if you will, I'm not going to sit down with anyone and say that this is the product until we've gotten to know each other. I know your financial situation, your goals, your dreams, your aspirations. Because a lot of times what happens is these providers, the other folks that are out there, they tell you what you want. I live by what I call the platinum rule. We've all heard the golden rule, which says, do unto others as you want done unto yourself. Well, the gentleman, Dr. Tony D'Alessandro, taught me the platinum rule years ago, which was do unto others as they want done unto them. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that make a lot more sense? Does to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, our little trees start growing. And again, you're ideally you're not touching this for the private vault purposes for, I want to say 7 to 10 years. You can get to it a little sooner, but the sooner you go and access your cash, that slows down the growth of your portfolio. And in the later years, when you really need it, maybe it's not as available as you'd like it to be. But 7 to 10 years, let those trees grow, and then you'll see some things that'll be real positive. Warren Buffett recently said this. He's reiterated it a couple of times. He said it a few years ago, but he said it again. 6 to 7% is what people should get used to expecting on average. Now, on average is on average. Down to 37%, it didn't feel like 6 or 7 would have looked awfully good when we were down that year. But a lot of times when people are running hypothetical illustrations and saying, oh, you should be able to earn this. Well, when you come off of 2 years ago when we were up 32%, then everybody's thinking you're supposed to make 32%. Well, that's not reality. Let's think about it. Even though we get some news that's coming out lately that's kind of rosy relative to news we've had in the past, think about your own community. Think about your own, the companies you work for, the companies you run, etc. We aren't seeing a lot of plants being built across this country to manufacture new products. We're just starting to see the housing market kind of come back a little bit. But a couple of years ago, people said, oh, David, it's coming back. It's just roaring back, the housing market. Well, here's the thing. Numbers are numbers. You've got to go behind the numbers. A couple of years ago, when the housing market was roaring back, here's what it was. In the first quarter of 2 years ago, Blackstone, who is a huge investor in assets, went out and bought 40,000 private residences, 40,000 homes. The reason they did it was that they had natural landlords who were the folks that, unfortunately for them, had been kicked to the curb and needed a place to live. They wouldn't have done that 10 years ago. They wouldn't have done that, even probably 5 years ago. But what they did was they said, we can go out and buy these private residences. Looks like the things have pretty much bottomed out in most markets. Have somebody go in and take care of it for us so that people don't steal the copper and all the things bad things that happen to homes if they're not taken care of. Make them pay us for staying there. And then we're going to put a wrapper around all these properties, and then we'll go sell them to somebody else, which is what they did. They announced that towards the end of last year, they were selling that paper. That's not necessarily suggesting the housing market's coming back. Well, then in June of that year, we had another big purchase spree, and everyone said, there you go, market's coming back. Well, what happened in May of that year was Bernanke came out of a room, said absolutely nothing. The media decided he said something, and the mortgage 30-year mortgage rate went from 3.5% to 4.5% within a few weeks. So all those folks that had been sitting on the sidelines since 2008 jumped in and said, oh my gosh, I better buy a home before it's 7%. So all I'm saying when I say that, folks, is, Warren Buffett, I think, we all have probably our different opinions. Obviously, he's done very well for himself, so he seems to be a very, very, very bright man. So I think, 6 to 7% is a reasonable number to expect through a diversified portfolio. There's no guarantees that you will get that, but a strategy such as the one I'm discussing can at least lock down some of that return for you and can put some guarantees in place, which is kind of interesting. We're getting towards the end here, folks. I want to thank you for hanging in with me, and certainly we'll hopefully get to know some of you. But this is a cartoon. In one hand, it's funny. On the other hand, it's not funny at all. But this is a gentleman at your typical mall. I don't know if you've been accosted lately. And I go down to the mall, and they're always asking me some question about something. But there's an elderly lady, as you can see. He just asked her the question, "What's your outlook on the economy, ma'am?" She goes, "What's my outlook on the economy? I'm out looking for a job." So again, not really very funny for some of us, but unfortunately, that's the reality that some of us potentially are facing if we don't do things properly. Now, some of the things I've talked about may have touched upon the legal side of our business. Some of the things I talked about touched upon the CPA or tax professional side. I am not a licensed lawyer, although I do work with a host of lawyers at our firm here, and very, very capable people. I'm not a CPA. I took 12 accounting classes in university, my BBA and my MBA, but I'm not a CPA. And by the way, I had a CPA a couple of weeks ago who told me he was a financial planner. I said, "Well, really? Well, which designation do you have?" He says, "I took some classes at school." And I said, there's something wrong with, I took 12 accounting classes, but I'm not an accountant. But you took a couple of financial planning classes and you're selling yourself as you're a financial planner. He or she may be very capable of doing that. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But I'm telling you right now, I'm not a professional tax planner. We do have those folks. If you have questions that I can't answer, I can certainly plug those people in as time goes on. I'm also not a licensed lawyer, so I don't want to pretend in any way, shape, or form that I am. So here's some contact me. I don't know if you have a pen handy. If worst case, if you don't, just call our main number and ask for David McShane, and they'll get you plugged into me. If any of you are interested, we're offering a 30-minute free consultation to at least have an initial discussion to see if this is something we should talk further about or not. No obligation, doesn't cost you a dime. There's the numbers. There's my email address, dmcshane @ Anderson Advisors, toll free 800-266-1296. My direct line is 702-214-1114, extension 310. And in the next 24 hours, the cover of that first page that you saw was Greg Booth's book. I read his book as I started my due diligence on this strategy as a CFP. And I don't want to say I was skeptical. I had no opinion, quite frankly, either way. I think his book is one of the best books that's been written on this topic. It's very easy to read. It explains it in detail. Might be something you'd be interested in. And anybody that signs up for a consultation with us, you don't have to have the consult in the next 24 hours. And frankly, I can't do it in the next 24 hours. But if you'll get in touch with us in the next 24 hours and set up an appointment, we'll make sure we get you a free ebook version of his book. If some of you would like a hard copy, because that's your preference, we also have those available for $20. But I think this is something that if you haven't been told about it before, or even if you had, maybe you should at least rethink it. It's got value in some people's portfolios, not everybody, and certainly not your whole portfolio. But if you have any interest, please let us know. dmcshane @ AndersonAdvisors.com.
All right, and what we're going to do right now, David, is that there's some questions on the web that people have asked. So I'm going to talk through those, and if you do still have questions, there's several of you on the line still all around the country here, and we want to be able to get to as many of you as possible. So I'm going to ask a couple of the questions that I see here, and a lot of them that have come in so far are related to age. At what age is this right for them or not? Some are saying, I'm 65, I'm 72, give us some ideas.
Yeah, it's always hard until you have the particulars of somebody's situation, but I would suggest that somebody that's in the 40 to 55 range, and possibly even 35, you could go younger, certainly. As you get a little bit more seasoned like myself, you possibly don't have the time to really give it the accumulation phase that you need. But there are options that we can talk about that are similar, but not exactly like this. So there are some options, but I would suggest anyone from kind of the 35 to 55-year-old range is the general age range.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then somebody asked, can I buy this through a self-directed IRA?
That's a good question, and that's one that I would have to research to give you a good answer on, to be honest. In theory, self-directed IRAs, you can, these days, it seems like you can buy almost anything. I've got some clients that have some what they call first trust deeds, which are basically tranches or pieces of a note. It's not the whole maturity of the note. It's a time frame, and found out that indeed those can be put into a self-directed IRA. So I think we have your email down, if I'm not mistaken. I can get you an answer to that question from somebody that has a much better answer.
Okay, sounds good. And what I'll do too is, as more questions come in, we'll get to those. But for right now, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about this, and again, as David said, if it's something that you're kind of outside that 55 age range, still send in a note. David can sit down and chat with you, kind of give you some options as well. Use the email up here. That's going to be the best way to schedule the consults, and he'll get back to you with date and time availability. You can certainly call in and leave a voicemail as well, but I'd say the best bet is probably just send in an email, right?
Yeah, I'll probably have my colleague here, Erica, is the one that sets up my consults for me. So if you hear from somebody named Erica, if you requested a consultation, she's on my team.
Sounds good. Well, we thank everybody for joining us again today, and thank you, David, for diving in here and giving us a good insight on the private vault.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone.